Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. There's something you've been feeling for a while, but you haven't had the words to name it. A silent discomfort, a heaviness in your chest, a kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. It's not stress, it's not anxiety, it's something deeper. It's the result of tolerating too much for too long, of bowing your head so many times that you forgot what it feels like to hold it high. And the worst part, you think it's normal. You were taught to swallow your feelings, to be good, to be patient, to keep the peace. You were told that if you just endured long enough, things would get better. But they didn't. What really happened is this. You became the emotional sponge for everything others didn't want to face. And in the process, you started to doubt your own worth. Now, when something hurts or feels wrong, you hesitate. You don't know if your reaction is valid or if you're just being too sensitive. But here's the truth. It's not sensitivity. It's intuition. It's your mind screaming, something's not right. Carl Jung saw this clearly. He spent his life diving into the shadow, the hidden part of the human soul. And what he found was chilling. Most of our deepest suffering doesn't come from obvious trauma. It comes from what we allow in silence, from the behaviors we excuse, the attitudes we normalize, the boundaries we stop defending. And the longer we avoid confrontation, the more those wounds rot inside us. This video isn't meant to comfort you. It's meant to wake you up. You're going to see with brutal clarity the 7 behaviors Jung warned us never to tolerate. Not because they're morally wrong, but because they are a threat to your identity, to your sanity, to your soul, to your soul. These behaviors are like termites, quiet, subtle, invisible, until one day everything inside you collapses. And no, they don't arrive with warning signs. They come wrapped in love, concern, friendship, even humor. They come softly, disguised. And if you're not paying attention, you let them in. And once you let them in, they stay. They repeat. And every repetition kills something in you. That's why you're here. Not for entertainment, not out of curiosity. You're here because something inside you knows. It's time. It's time to name what you've been carrying. It's time to stop allowing. It's time to reclaim what you abandoned just to survive. And no, this isn't just about others. Some of these behaviors, you've done them too. And that's why they hurt. Because you don't just suffer them, you repeat them. Not because you're cruel, but because no one showed you a different way. But now you're going to see. One by one, behavior by behavior, we'll uncover what Jung tried to warn us about. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. It will hurt. It will confront you. But it will also, finally, set you free. Some things seem small until they destroy you. Sometimes it starts with a phrase, a comment, an unsolicited piece of advice. It doesn't sound cruel, it doesn't sound dangerous, but if you let it slide again and again, it becomes your new normal. And that's when you stop being yourself and start becoming what others have shaped in silence. Carl Jung warned us about this silent enemy. Covert emotional manipulation. It doesn't come with chains. It doesn't shout. It doesn't arrive in the form of a threat. It arrives with tenderness, with subtle guilt, with words like, "I'm saying this for your own good. If you really loved me, you would do this. I don't understand why it affects you so much." And suddenly you begin to doubt, not just the moment, but your own perception of it. Then, without realizing it, you begin to doubt yourself. That's the strategy. The manipulator doesn't need to control you directly. They only need to get you to question your own instincts. Once you do that, you'll police yourself. And the cruelest part? It often comes from people you love, people you trust. That makes it more poisonous, because now, loyalty gets mistaken for submission. Silence gets mistaken for strength. Jung explained it with chilling clarity. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And what better way to avoid your own soul than by shaping someone else's? Emotional manipulation feeds on your upbringing, your fear of conflict, your desire to keep the peace. But what it really steals is your self-trust. And once they know you won't push back, once they know your resistance is soft, they escalate. Control was never the end goal. The next step is even darker. When control is no longer enough, something more hurtful, more public, and more twisted begins to surface. Humiliation disguised as humor. It's not a direct insult, it's a comment tossed into the air, a mockery cloaked in a smile, a phrase said as a joke but sharpened like a blade. Everyone laughs, except you. But you laugh too, because you know if you don't, you'll be labeled as bitter, uptight, or lacking a sense of humor. Here's the trap: if you protest, you're too sensitive. If you laugh along, it continues. Either way, you lose. Each joke drives another splinter into your self-esteem. And people wonder why you seem quieter over time, why you withdraw. It's because what they call playful teasing has become psychological erosion. Jung knew the unconscious doesn't distinguish between play and reality. It only registers repetition. That's why mockery, even when it's just a joke, becomes a form of symbolic violence. It subtly places you beneath others, marks you as the weak one, and makes your pain invisible. And here's the darkest part. The people who do this most often are the most insecure. They weaponize laughter to avoid looking inward. They chip away at others because their own shadow whispers that they are less. So they make you smaller to feel bigger. But you were not put on this earth to be the target of someone else's demons. You don't exist so others can discharge their emotional dysfunction at your expense. And if you tolerate this pattern without resistance, even unintentionally, you open the door to something far worse. Once they've mocked you in public without consequence, the next step is far more insidious. They begin to rewrite your reality, not with facts, but with subtle distortions, quiet manipulations, psychological warfare. This is the world of gaslighting. It doesn't begin with a scream, it begins with denial. You bring up something that happened, and they say, that never happened. You express hurt, and they say, you're being dramatic. You recall something clearly, and they say, you're imagining things. At first, you defend yourself. Then you hesitate. Eventually, you doubt. First the moment, then the memory, until finally, you doubt yourself. That's the goal. Because the skilled gaslighter doesn't need to win the argument. They just need you to question your own mind. Carl Jung called this internal betrayal. The precise moment your psyche turns against itself. When your survival instincts, rather than protecting your truth, start bending to protect the relationship. And once you no longer trust what you feel, remember or sense, they've won. Not visibly, not loudly, but completely. Gaslighting is not just manipulation. It's psychological erosion. It's turning someone's reality into smoke. A fog so thick that even your most vivid memories feel like hallucinations. And the more it happens, the more you internalize it. The more you second-guess everything, not just with them, but in your entire life. You become unsure, hesitant, paralyzed. You ask others for validation you should be able to give yourself. You rehearse conversations in your head, trying to make sense of what's real. And all the while they continue, calm and smiling, acting like nothing's wrong. Because to them, there isn't. Gaslighting isn't loud. It's surgical, quiet, invisible. And by the time you notice the damage, you've already handed over your perception to someone else. And here's the most sinister twist. When you start to crack, when the confusion finally makes you vulnerable, they don't help. They strike deeper. After you've been manipulated, ridiculed, gaslit, and emotionally invalidated, the coldest blow arrives. The most calculated, the most devastating, silent contempt. It's not a scream, not an insult. It's a look, a deliberate absence, a silence so sharp it slices through your need for connection. They don't raise their voice, they erase you. And still you feel it. Every minute without a reply is another wound. Every glance that avoids you is another reminder. You're being punished, not with noise, but with nothing. And that kind of punishment leaves no bruises, only hollowness. This is where many people break, not because someone shouted at them, but because someone decided they weren't even worth addressing. Silent contempt makes you question your worth. You start to believe that your existence depends on someone else's acknowledgement. But Jung understood this. Contempt doesn't need explanation to destroy. It isolates. It diminishes. It convinces you that invisibility is the price you pay for connection. And over time, it conditions you to stay small, to silence your voice just to be tolerated. When you reach this point, after everything you've endured without breaking, something fundamental begins to shift. You stop trusting. You stop speaking. You stop feeling like yourself. And if that sounds familiar, it's not just hurt. It's disconnection. You're no longer living from your center. You're surviving on scraps of approval. And that, Jung warned, is when the soul begins to die. Not all at once, but in silence. After the mockery, the manipulation, the invalidation, there comes something even colder. The blow that doesn't land with noise but with silence. Contempt without words. It's not yelling. It's not even criticism. It's the glance that doesn't land. The response that never arrives. The deliberate absence. The withdrawal of presence like a punishment you were never told you deserved. They don't need to insult you. They simply erase you. And the worst part? You feel it. Not in your mind, but in your chest. That aching awareness that something is wrong, that someone who once saw you now looks past you, that someone who once responded now lets your messages rot in silence, and it wounds you more than any word could, because it makes you question your worth, your presence, your place in their world. Carl Jung understood contempt as the psychic scalpel, not loud but precise, not explosive but corrosive. It makes you feel invisible while you're still standing in the room. You begin to whisper instead of speak, apologize before you ask, and eventually you stop reaching out at all. Because nothing hurts more than being ignored when you're still trying to matter. Over time, the silence becomes your language too. You stop expressing yourself not because you have nothing to say, but because you've convinced yourself no one's listening. You start believing you're too much, or worse, not enough. And that's when you start to break in ways you can't even name. You become passive, numb. You perform your life instead of living it. Not because you want to, but because the silent rejection has rewired your sense of self. This is how contempt poisons you, not by fighting you, but by fading you. And when you've been faded long enough, when your voice has been dismissed, mocked, and erased, you begin to wonder if it was ever real to begin with. But it was. You were. You still are. And that flicker you feel right now, that ache in your gut, that's not weakness. That's your spirit remembering it deserves to be heard. This is the end of the road. The deepest cut. It's what happens after you've endured manipulation, mockery, confusion, invalidation, and silence, and you finally surrender. You decide that being mistreated is better than being alone. That belonging at any cost is worth more than self-respect. And that's when the most tragic shift occurs. You stop asking for better. You settle for less. You tolerate crumbs and convince yourself it's a feast. You justify the unjustifiable. You call it love, but it's really resignation. You begin to believe that you deserve it, that this is just how it is, and that maybe you're the problem. This is the moment Jung warned us about, what he called psychic death, the quiet collapse of the self. When a person no longer resists, no longer speaks, no longer dreams, they just adapt. They shrink to fit the mold others gave them. They begin to survive instead of live. They accept contempt not as an insult, but as the cost of being kept around. And here's the cruelest part. They believe it's normal. They think they've found stability, when in reality, they've lost themselves completely. But let's be clear. Nothing is worth this. Not love, not approval, not family, not community. Because if you must abandon yourself to be accepted, then you're not truly accepted. You're tolerated. And that is not love. That is erasure. Jung taught that what we refuse to face eventually controls us. What we accept, what we bring into the light can finally be transformed. If you've reached this point, where contempt feels familiar, where mistreatment feels earned, then it's not too late, but it is urgent. You don't belong where you're invisible. You don't belong where your silence is more welcomed than your truth. Walk away, not to be alone, but to remember who you are without distortion. This is the final stage, the most devastating. It doesn't come with noise, it comes with surrender. After enduring manipulation, ridicule, confusion, invalidation, silence, and self-abandonment, something breaks. And in that breaking, a dangerous belief begins to grow. Maybe this is just what I deserve. You begin to accept crumbs as meals. You settle for cold glances, one-sided conversations, invisible roles. You convince yourself that staying in this space, however painful, is better than being alone with your truth. This is the price of belonging, you tell yourself. And over time, you start to believe it. Carl Jung called this state a kind of psychic death, a quiet internal collapse. Not a scream, but a fading. The moment when the self no longer fights, no longer speaks, no longer feels like it matters. You stop asking for change. You stop hoping. You simply endure. You adapt to mistreatment. You rationalize contempt. You confuse survival with love. But here's the hardest truth. Nothing is worth betraying yourself every day. Not love, not family, not history, not shared memories. Because every day you stay in a place that shrinks you, you die a little more. Loneliness is hard, but being surrounded by people who diminish you, who ghost your existence in plain sight, that's a different kind of hell. You weren't meant to beg for recognition. You weren't built to shrink for comfort. You are not here to carry silence like a second skin. You are here to inhabit your life, fully, loudly, unapologetically. And if that means walking away from what you once clung to, then let go. Because if you don't, contempt will become your home, and you'll forget that you ever had the right to leave. You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are not a burden for needing love that doesn't hurt. You're just finally remembering what it feels like to belong to yourself. If you've made it this far, it's not by accident. Something inside you has been stirred, a voice, a flicker, a quiet refusal to keep living like this. You've seen the 7 behaviors for what they are, not just annoyances or personality quirks, but poisons. Slow, silent, systemic poisons that wear down your soul. And now that you've seen them, you can't unsee them. But here's the twist no one expects. Most people won't change. Even after understanding everything, they'll go back to the same patterns, the same relationships, the same quiet betrayals. Why? Because staying asleep is easier. It's familiar. It hurts less than facing the terrifying freedom of being authentic. But if you're still here, if you felt these words in your chest, you're not most people. There's a fire starting in you. You feel it. That small, undeniable flame that whispers, no more. You might not know what to do next. You might not have a plan. But you do have something more important. A decision. A raw, aching decision to no longer abandon yourself. To stop living as a supporting character in your own life. To stop explaining away the pain. To stop calling sacrifice love and silence strength. The path ahead won't be easy. You'll lose people. You'll lose habits. You'll lose the comfort of blame. But you won't be losing anything real. Only what was already stealing your light. Every loss will be a clearing. Every ending, a beginning. Carl Jung didn't write to comfort. He wrote to confront. And now you've been confronted. With truth, with shadow, with self. The only question is, what will you do now? Because the real power isn't in being respected by the world. It's in finally no longer needing it. If you've made it this far, it's not by accident. Something inside you brought you here. Not curiosity. Not entertainment, a deep knowing that what you've been allowing has been slowly eroding who you are. This wasn't just a list, it was a mirror. And if it hurt to look into it, that's not weakness, that's awakening. Carl Jung didn't write to comfort, he wrote to confront. He believed that true transformation begins not with self-help, but with radical self-honesty. And now that you've seen these behaviors, not just in others but in yourself, the question becomes, what will you do? Because most people, even after understanding all of this, won't change a thing. They'll go back to the same environments, the same relationships, the same patterns, not because they're unaware, but because comfort is seductive. Because pretending hurts less than facing the void of living authentically. But if you're still here, still listening, then you're not most people. You feel it, that quiet fire beginning to burn. You may not have all the answers. You may not even know the next step. But something inside you is done. Done shrinking, done silencing, done surrendering. That's where the real work begins. Not with blame, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Where have you tolerated the intolerable? Who have you kept close out of fear, not truth? What parts of yourself have you buried just to stay acceptable? This isn't about becoming hard. It's about becoming whole. And yes, change will cost you. You'll lose things. People, habits, illusions. But here's what no one tells you. What you lose in that fire was never truly yours. What survives it, that's what's real. So now it's your turn to act. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now. If this video stirred even one buried truth within you, leave this phrase in the comments. Not for me, but for you. What you tolerate buries you. Write it, say it, own it. Because that sentence is a declaration that you're done accepting poison as peace, that you're done confusing attention with love. That you're done betraying yourself just to belong. And if you want more content like this, raw, psychological, unfiltered, subscribe. Not for validation, not for me, for the part of you that's waking up, the part of you that refuses to sleep again. This is not motivation. This is truth. And in a world of noise, truth is gold. Now close this video, but do not close what just lit up inside you. Walk differently, see differently, tolerate less, live more. Because remember, the one who wakes up never sleeps again.